Well, it's probably not breaking news to anybody that going on a Disney World vacation is very expensive. And on many levels, that's always been the case. But as of recently, with Disney raising prices on just about everything across the board, one of the questions many people have asked is how are people still affording to go? Well, Lending Tree has dug into the numbers here, and almost half of parents are going into debt to go on a Disney World trip. So I figured let's read through this article and get some thoughts on it. So, hi, I'm Jared with Capture the Magic. And again, the headline here from Lending Tree is 45% of Disney going parents with young children have gone into debt for trips. It says, with Disney prices as high as they are, once upon a dream has become once upon a debt for many Americans, particularly parents with young children. According to the latest Lending Tree survey of over 2,000 U.S. consumers, 24% of Disney goers have gone into debt for a trip, a figure that rises to 45% among parents with children younger than 18. Magic Kingdom empty wallet, Disney comes with debt. Experiencing the magic of Disney comes at a hefty cost. Across the 77% of theme park going parents with kids younger than 18 who've been to Disney, 45% have gone into debt for a trip. That's up a whopping 50% from the 30% of Disney going parents with young kids who said they took on debt in the 2022 survey. Tighter budgets and rampant inflation mean these parents are more likely to take on debt than before. Of parents with young children who've taken on debt for a Disney trip, 83% said or did so in the past 5 years, with 35% taking it on in the past year alone. Comparatively, just 17% took on their Disney debt greater than 5 years ago. I mean, again, you're talking basically doubled even in the past 5 years of people taking on debt to go onto a Disney trip. That's wild. Looking more broadly at the 75% of theme park going Americans who've been to Disney, 24% have gone into debt for at least one trip. That's up 33% from 18% in our 2022 survey. Of this 24%, 74% of them took on their debt in the past 5 years, with 29% doing so in the past year. By age group, Gen Zers are 18 to 27 years old, are the most likely to take on Disney debt at 39%. That compares with 36% for millennials, 20% of Gen Xers, and 7% of baby boomers. Additionally, men who've been to Disney Park, 32%, are twice as likely as women, 16%, to take on related debt. I'm curious if that includes like families, like the dad makes most of the money. I'm curious how that number is broken down, but either way, it's an interesting number there. Disney's not just for the littlest mouseketeers. A trip to Disney may be the ideal holiday for kids, but they're not the only ones looking for a good time. In fact, 29% of Disney goers typically make their trips an adults-only affair. That breaks down to 20% who go with their adult family and 10% who go with adult friends. Gen Zers and baby boomers are the most likely to typically have an adults only Disney trip at 35% for both. That's followed by Gen Xers at 28%, while millennials, 24%, are the least likely to do so. That's also right now, those are the people that like millennials are the ones that have the most kids right now. So you're looking, baby boomers, empty nesters, they just want to go enjoy, travel and do things. And then the Gen Zers are those that are young, they're not paying for family stuff. And so they're just going on, again, this is the demographic that Disney had made an effort to go after a while ago, which were essentially like, what they call dinks, double income, no kids. And that's probably that demographic you're looking at there, which Disney has been basically courting ever. Chapek talked about it, but they've been, going after that demo at least for the past 10 years for sure. It says parents think the memories are worth the splash of cash. Despite a hefty bill waiting at home, parents don't regret overspending for Disney. Of parents with young kids who've taken on debt, 59% have no regrets. Across all Americans who've taken on Disney debt, that figure is 64%. Notably, women with Disney debt, 75%, are more likely to say they have no regrets than men with Disney debt. That number doesn't surprise me. Additionally, 90% of parents who've taken their children to Disney say it was a treat rather than saying they felt obligated or indifferent was 10%. Once again, women, 93% of them are more likely to share this sentiment than men at 87%. By income group, parents earning between $30,000 and $50,000 a year are the most likely to say taking their children to Disney was a treat. When it comes to how much debt they took on, parents of young children took on an average of $1,900 for Disney, the highest across all demographics. Across all Americans who took on Disney debt, that figure was $1,690. Schultz, author of Ask Questions, Save Money, Make More, How to Take Control of Your Financial Life, but not have a short book title, says the debt figures are about in line with what he'd expect. While it may seem high, he says it may do more good than harm. I'd argue that it could be considered good debt, he says. The debt helped bring you an experience that you and your family are going to remember, and talk about for the rest of your lives, which is a pretty darn good return on your investment. Of course, that doesn't mean you should do it often. Every once in a while, a little debt generated in service of a greater goal can be fine. I mean, I understand the sentiment because I would say like, I think as you get older, you also learn like things are, you can there's always new things to get, but something that you typically don't regret are, memories with your families, going on trips, experiences, things of that nature. So I think those things are a good thing. And I think you're seeing in the younger generations as well, like they understand this and appreciate this more than maybe older generations who had a different outlook on things. But at the same time, you know, especially this in the financial world that we're in now with inflation and the economy not being great, taking on debt, or I guess you could say on some level nobody's being forced to, but let's say if you want your kids to experience a Disney trip like you did, which is how many people view it, it's becoming so cost prohibitive to do so. And if they want that experience for their kids and know how they remembered it and the nostalgia, the they have to go into debt to do it. They may not regret it, but it's also something I have many questions about. Of is this sustainable, especially if the economy continues to worsen? Like this is not a sustainable thing, that it's requiring so much money to go out and have these memories and experiences, especially when you consider that when you look at the debt usage by Americans, it is going up for just household necessities. It's one thing to go on a trip, you put it on a credit card and you pay it off later, like that's understandable. But when you're already putting essentially necessities on credit, it gets really difficult to then say, yeah, let's throw a Disney trip on top of that. So it's really easy to see how this would get cut from that, especially during harder times. And then you're seeing the softening of demand that Disney's even themselves talked about. I think a lot of that goes into this of people just not having, they may back like 5, 6 years ago, they had a little credit. They say, hey, sure, throw it on there. They get a good interest rate, whatever. We'll pay it off as it goes along. But it starts becoming a much more difficult proposition with everything else, piled on top of it. Most Americans won't carry their Disney debt for long. Their last trip, 75% of indebted Disney goers say it would take 6 months or less to pay it off. And 32% said it would take specifically 3 to 6 months for was the most common response. Yeah. I mean, again, you're talking $1,900. I mean, it's not nothing, but you can pay that off in a few months. But again, I think it goes into the greater picture of like if they're being forced to put all this on debt with everything else going on, that becomes a different scenario. Says food transportation broke the budget for most. Theme park food may be notoriously expensive, but many Disney goers didn't expect costs to be as high as they were. In fact, 65% of those Disney debts say in park food and beverages were significantly higher than they budgeted for. And that was the most common response. Some Disney World restaurants advertise dining costs of more than $60 per adult. I think food prices are something, again, it's a thing you don't incur until you're on your trip. So it's already expensive to pay for the tickets, for your flight, for the hotels, everything that goes along with it. And then you look at the prices of the food. And again, we talked about another video where Disney has been outpacing inflation, like basically double inflation in terms of the cost of food items, even in the past like 5 to 6 years. So the food prices are a sticker shock for many people. So I could definitely see you're hungry in the park. You got a family of four, maybe a family of five, and you go up to, a quick service place, and all of a sudden you're looking at over $100 for lunch. And then you think about if you go to Food and Wine and you buy five here, $8 here, all of a sudden at the end of the day, you've spent a couple $100 on food. And I think this is something that people don't really think about. And I think this is one reason why cruising has become popular, is because for the most part on cruises, everything's paid for. You don't have to pay any extra for food. Now, obviously, if you want to do certain activities or drink packages and things like that, but for the most part, your food is completely taken care of. And I think that's something that a lot of people just don't think about going into their trip, or just really how expensive it's going to be. But I guess I will say, in defense of Disney, other theme parks that I've been around, and even like sporting events, are more expensive than Disney. So I think in general, going out and doing things, the food cost is just a lot more than people anticipate. But I think obviously here on the survey, it's something that people weren't expecting to incur, or at least not to that level when heading to Disney. But Schultz says there's a workaround. One of the best ways to cut costs is to bring your own food and non-alcoholic drinks to the parks, he says. There are limits to what you can bring, but packing snacks and refillable water bottles, for example, can make a real difference in the overall cost of your Disney experience. I mean, it's true, and we talk about it all the time on our podcast about like park tips for like Universal and Disney. I mean, if you want to, really cut costs, it's food. You bring your own food, you bring your own beverages, you just don't eat out as much. I mean, that will save you a significant amount of money, especially when considering, if you're a family of 4 or 5, it's lunch, you want to go get some food. you're probably, if everybody gets an entree, I mean, you're probably going to be close to, if not over $100 for just a quick service meal. That's not even going out to a fancy restaurant. So if you bring your own food in there, I mean, you maybe pay family 4 or 5, maybe you pay 20 some bucks for everything you brought in. You can do the math on how many meals you have on a trip, how much money that saves you. So that is one way you can save money. And I think that's what a lot of people do, especially with the increased cost with, say, Genie Plus, or what was Genie Plus, now it is Lightning Lane, all these additional things that Disney charges for. I think food's the thing that people are going to cut and bring their own in the parks. Following food, 48% said they didn't budget enough for general transportation costs, and 47% say accommodations. And here's a chart for it here of all the things that they significantly more expensive than originally had budgeted for, but food is by far the one that is the winner there. So, cost and politics stop some Americans from going. Overall, just 25% of Americans who've been to a theme park haven't been to a Disney park. When those who've never been to a theme park were asked why, most 60% said it was too expensive, particularly women. Following that, 31% said it was too far away, and 26% said they can't stand the lines. That's not the only thing stopping Americans from visiting. Recent political events have swayed some. Across all Americans, 40% say their willingness to visit Disney has been affected by its political views, with 22% less interested and 19% more interested in visiting. That is one of the first times I've seen. I mean, we've talked about many times about the brand damage that Disney's done. Not only is it more expensive and prohibitive to go, them wading into, seemingly political issues, or at least cultural issues, is something that I just have always looked at it as, I don't know what good they gain from it, but all you potentially do is just put people off on your brand and say, oh, I'm not doing, I'm not going there because of that stance. I've always felt all along is companies like Disney and entertainment companies should just entertain and not wade into these matters, because for one thing, you're not going to change anybody's mind. Like, Disney takes a stance on a certain topic. It's not like people are then going to say, oh, well, okay, I'm changing my mind. All it really does is create conflict between people and what they think about something. And again, you've already got increased cost, and then you have this going into it. Like, it's just, and I think from this survey is something that it doesn't do the brand any good to wade into these issues, whether you agree with them or you don't. I think for myself and many people that I've talked to, they just want, if you're an entertainment company, just entertain. Like, nobody's looking to you for moral guidance. They're not looking to you for your hottest take on the latest divisive issue. It's just simply like, if you want to go to a theme park, you want to have a good time with your family, or you want to go see a movie or a show, and you just want to enjoy yourself. That's really what people want for the most part, I think, from entertainment companies. So this is one of the first times I've actually seen a number. Now, granted, this is just a survey here, but it's still 40% say their willingness to visit a park has been affected by the political views, and 22% of those being less interested. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that a decent segment of the population is basically not wanting to go to your parks now because of some, your stances or things that you've said in the past, which will end up hitting the bottom line at some point. So that's a number that I do find pretty interesting there. And then it basically wraps up with how to save money. I mean, I don't know, saving money, save money, take on a loan or a credit card that has a lower interest rate, things like that. But no, I thought this was an interesting article because, again, we talk a lot about on this channel, and a lot of people have talked about it in general as well, about how much more expensive Disney is. And this one concentrating on Disney, Universal is not cheap either. This one being focused on Disney, obviously, but we talk about Universal, their tickets aren't any cheaper, but they do have areas where they are more cost friendly in terms of their hotels. Some of their bigger ticket packages, some of their annual pass holder packages are cheaper than Disney and do offer some relief. And typically when you see them matched up against each other, like Universal is not significantly cheaper, but it typically will be cheaper. But when you're looking at Disney and just, it's such a short amount of time that all this has changed so much in terms of like how aggressive they've been with the price increases. It's interesting to look at these numbers to see the amount of people going into debt. Again, almost 50% of all parents with young children are going into debt for a trip. My main point of this is like, A, this doesn't surprise me, but B, again, how sustainable is this? And I think if you're Disney looking at this, and they're not, from everything I've seen, they're not going to slow down on any of the price increases. So, you just look at this and go, how much more will people be willing to do this? Especially if they go, this is the thing I think about too, is maybe they did go, they went into debt for a trip, and it wasn't how they remembered it. It was a lot different. They felt nickeled and dimed, and they didn't have a good time. How many of those people, and this would be an interesting thing to follow up with, of the people that have gone into debt for a Disney trip would be willing to go back? I think that number is probably not as high as it used to be, especially for Disney. And I think this is where I think Disney's short-sightedness is yeah, they make a lot of money on people coming one time or the first time. They're buying Genie Plus or Lightning Lanes, they're eating food, they're doing all this stuff like that. But when it comes a year later, 2 years later, about going on another trip, how many of those people felt good about their vacation and want to spend that money yet again to go? Because there's a lot of places that go on vacation. Again, cruise lines are one where you go and the food's taken care of. There's a lot of other trips you can go on. And there's Universal. Again, Epic Universe is opening in less than a year. So you've got a lot of people looking at other even theme park options and just looking at it and saying, well, we spent the money here, but let's spend it over here this time. That's a number I'm interested in to see how many of those people would be willing to do it again. Because if they go once, they didn't enjoy it, and they're not going to come back, that's going to hurt Disney. And that's what Disney parks were essentially built on, were people that went and they continually went, especially the middle class people that have been priced out. And then their kids go and they pass it on to it's a generational thing, like almost a rite of passage to take your kids to Disney. But as it becomes increasingly more expensive and more complicated, you just have to wonder, how long is this sustainable, especially given the current economic outlook right now, where a lot of people again are taking on a lot of debt for just household necessities, food, utilities, like just living. Those people are not going to be looking to take on debt to go on a vacation when they're just basically trying to survive. So I think this puts, this is obviously a survey, but it's a good insight and really just how burdensome it has become to take your family to the Disney parks when obviously it never was cheap. I'm not ever making the argument that it was just, it didn't cost you anything to go to the Disney parks, but the amount it has gone up in such a short amount of time is very shocking for a lot of people. Even people that went on a trip in say 2019 and they go in 2024, they're shocked at the price differences. I mean, you're talking I've seen different people talk about it cost us $400 in 2018, 2019 to go, and they went in 2024 and it was basically almost $1,000. And it's just a lot of it is sticker shock because people just remember, oh, it wasn't that bad, and then you go. And so you just have to ask, like, how much longer is the audiences willing to deal with that and put up with that? I think is a really good question. I'm not pertaining to know the answer to that question. It's one of those things where I feel like once that kind of wanes, it really starts to wane and they'll really feel that. But it's in terms of like, what if it hits that point, what would Disney do? I mean, that's a really good question as well, because you have to imagine with all the things they're going to be adding to the parks that they announced at D23, I don't see prices coming down. I mean, Disney typically does not do that. They'll offer discounts and they'll offer specials, but they're not going to change that daily rate of a ticket down necessarily. I mean, I would be utterly shocked if they ever did that. So, I think if anything, I don't know if this gives us any concrete evidence of what, audiences will do. It's a good discussion piece in terms of, again, for almost 50% of parents with young kids going to Disney are going into debt. Again, how much longer is that sustainable? I think that's a good question to have. And again, I'm not saying I have the answers to this. This doesn't shock me by any means, but I think this is ultimately a good thing with more competition for Disney, because I think Disney has done a lot of these price increases because they never have been pushed. And now with Universal, and now with, there's regional theme parks, there's cruise lines, there's other things that are competing for families' vacation dollars. I think this is a good thing because Disney won't be able to be as aggressive if they start feeling the impact from, say, Epic Universe and Universal Studios and cruise lines. They're going to have to be more in line with other vacations to really compete with what they're offering, and also at the same time up the experience for guests. I think it looks like they do this survey every 2 years, what this looks like in 2026. I would be also curious to see a similar one for, say, a Universal trip. I don't think they have the numbers for that. And obviously Disney is a much bigger, theme park destination at this point. So I would be curious to see other destinations and other, Universal and cruise lines, and how many, people are going into debt for those trips compared to Disney, and see how that compares. I think a decent takeaway too is Disney's political stances have affected them, at least seemingly in this survey here. And that's something that we've all talked about. It's something you really can't, it's not a tangible thing because it's hard to really know. You're talking about consumer sentiment, and that's hard to really quantify, but this is one that actually showed it. So that was an interesting takeaway from this. I'm not a financial expert, but going into debt, you don't want to do it unless you have to. And I think a lot of people feel that it's a rite of passage. They need to take their kids to Disney because they went as kids. So I think there's a lot of pressure, even if it's just inside of a family, in terms of, well, I did it, I want to provide that for my kids. So I think a lot of people feel a lot of pressure that they need to do this. And again, how long does that last? When's the breaking point for that? It's going to be different for different people. But I am interested to see this how this looks in the years going forward, especially with more competition. But either way, that's going to be it though for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Disney World, Universal Studios, Epic Universe, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about these numbers? And does any of this surprise you in terms of the amount of debt that people go into for a Disney vacation? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.